Before we begin, find yourself in a comfortable position. These stories, they're different from what you might have heard before. As a night shift nurse, there are things we see when the hospital falls quiet, things we're asked not to discuss. Story 1. The Patient Log. Let me tell you about something that happened during my night shift last week. I'm a nurse at Central Hospital, and I always work on floor 7. Most nights are quiet, but this one was different. It was 11:30 p.m., and I had just started my usual rounds. The hallway was empty, lit by those dim fluorescent lights we use at night. The night shift is always different from the day shift. During the day, these halls are busy with doctors, visitors, and other nurses. But at night, you notice every little sound, the hum of the machines, the soft beeping of heart monitors, and the squeak of shoes on the polished floor. I started my shift like I always do, checking the patient logs at the nurses' station. We keep detailed records of every patient, their room numbers, medications, and special needs. Each patient's information must be perfect. One small mistake could be dangerous. That's why we keep both computer records and paper logs. The paper logs are our backup in case the system fails, which happens more often during night shifts. That's when I noticed something odd. Room 713's records didn't match. According to the computer, room 713 was empty, but the paper log showed it had a patient, an elderly woman named Sarah Collins. Her information was detailed. Admitted at 3:33 a.m., complaints of chest pain, required heart monitoring. At first, I thought it was just another computer error. We get those sometimes, especially during system updates. But something felt different this time. The paper log entry was too detailed, too specific. It listed her medications, allergies, and even her preferred sleeping position, on her left side, with 2 pillows. I decided to check room 713 myself. It's at the far end of the hall, past the supply closet and the staff break room. As I walked there, I noticed the temperature dropping. Floor 7 always had heating issues, but this felt different. My breath was starting to fog in the air. The lights started acting strange, too. Not just flickering, they were dimming in sequence, like they were following my steps down the hallway. One by one, getting darker as I passed under them. I've worked night shifts for 5 years, and I'd never seen them do that before. Then I heard it. The call button from room 713. Not the usual sharp beeping we get when a patient needs help. This was softer, almost like it was trying to be quiet. But room 713 was supposed to be empty. Standing outside the room, I checked my tablet again. The computer still showed the room as empty. But now there was something else. The system showed the room's temperature as 62 degrees, much colder than our standard 70 degrees. I opened the door slowly. The room was dark except for the light from the hallway and the green glow of the monitors. The bed was made perfectly, untouched, but something wasn't right. The chair next to it was warm, like someone had just been sitting there. And on the small whiteboard where we write the nurse's name, someone had written my name in perfect handwriting, better than my own. That's when I remembered Sarah Collins. 3 months ago, she was my patient in this exact room. She was different from other patients, always cheerful despite her condition. She loved to tell stories about her grandchildren and always thanked the nurses, even when she was in terrible pain. She passed away peacefully in her sleep one night, right here in room 713. I was the one who found her. I checked the paper log again under the hallway light. The date on Sarah Collins's entry was from last night, written in what looked exactly like my handwriting. But I hadn't written it. I couldn't have written it. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The medication list in the log was identical to Sarah's original medications from 3 months ago. Every detail matched. The doses, the times, even my special notes about her preferred method of taking pills with apple juice instead of water. As I stood there, staring at the log, all the call buttons on the entire floor lit up at once. No sound, just lights. They stayed on for exactly 3 seconds. then went dark. When I looked back at the log in my hands, the entry about Sarah Collins had vanished. The pages didn't even show signs of being written on. But here's the strangest part. Now, every night when I work on floor 7, exactly at 3:33 a.m., I hear a soft "thank you" when I pass room 713. It sounds just like Sarah's voice. At first it scared me, but now I always make sure to say, "You're welcome." Some nights I swear I can smell apple juice in the air. The computer still shows room 713 as empty every night. But sometimes, when I look at the patient logs, I catch glimpses of entries written in my handwriting. Entries I know I didn't write. And every time I check the room, that chair is always warm. Story 2. The service elevator. While that experience with room 713 was strange, what happened in the old service elevator last month still gives me chills every time I think about it. Let me tell you why I now take the stairs, even after a 12-hour shift. Central Hospital has 6 regular elevators that everyone uses: patients, visitors, and staff. But there's also a service elevator, tucked away in the back corridor. It's older than the others, with faded buttons and scratched metal walls. We mostly use it for moving supplies and equipment between floors. That night, I was working an extra shift. The regular elevators were under maintenance, so everyone had to use the service elevator. I needed to get some supplies from the basement storage room to floor 7. It was around 2 a.m., that quiet time when most patients are asleep. The service elevator is in the oldest part of the hospital. To get there, you have to walk down a long corridor with motion sensor lights. These lights are supposed to turn on when someone walks by, but they've never worked properly. That night, they were flickering more than usual. When I reached the elevator, something felt off. The floor indicator above the door was showing strange numbers our hospital doesn't have. We only have 8 floors, but the display was showing 13, then 15, then back to normal numbers. I pressed the call button anyway. The elevator took longer than usual to arrive. When it finally came, the doors opened with a screech that echoed through the empty corridor. Inside, the elevator looked different. The usual scratches on the walls seemed to form patterns now, almost like words. I stepped in and pressed B for basement. The doors closed and the elevator started moving down. That's when things got really strange. The light inside started to dim, and I could smell something odd, like old cleaning supplies and burnt rubber. The digital floor display started acting up. It showed B, then 1, then numbers I'd never seen before. The elevator was moving slower than usual, and the temperature kept dropping. My phone's screen started flickering, and then it shut off completely. Halfway down, the elevator stopped. Not with the usual gentle stop, but a sudden jerk that made me grab the handrail. The emergency light came on, casting everything in a dim red glow. In that light, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. Handprints on the mirrors, small ones like a child's. Then I heard something that made my heart stop. A child's laugh, coming from somewhere above the elevator. It sounded distant at first, then closer, like it was moving down through the elevator shaft. I pressed the emergency button, but instead of the usual buzz, I heard static, then a voice through the speaker. But it wasn't our security staff. It was a child's voice, saying numbers in a sing-song way. 7, 4, 13. The temperature dropped even more. I could see my breath now. The handprints on the mirror started to fog up, like someone was pressing their hands against the other side of the glass. In the dim red light, I saw something in the mirror that still haunts me. A reflection of a small figure standing behind me, wearing what looked like an old-style hospital gown. I closed my eyes. They tell us in nursing school never to show fear around patients, even in the strangest situations. I counted to 10 slowly, trying to stay calm. When I opened my eyes, the elevator was moving again, but going up instead of down. It stopped at every floor on the way up, doors opening to empty hallways. But at each floor, I heard that same child's laugh, getting fainter as we went higher. Finally, the elevator stopped at floor 7. When the doors opened, the regular hallway lights were on, and everything looked normal. Later that night, I asked our maintenance worker, Joe, about the service elevator's history. He got quiet, then told me something that made everything worse. 30 years ago, there was a children's ward in the basement. It closed after a fire, but before that, the kids used to play a game in the service elevator, pressing all the buttons and counting floors in funny ways. The next day, I checked the security cameras to see what they recorded in the elevator. The footage showed me standing alone, completely still, for 17 minutes. But I know I was only in there for 5 minutes at most. And in the footage, every time the doors opened, you can see a small shadow next to mine, even though I was alone. Now, whenever I have to work late shifts, I always take the stairs. But sometimes, when I pass the service elevator late at night, I hear numbers being counted in a child's voice. 7, 4, 13, and the floor indicator still shows impossible numbers, counting floors that don't exist. After what happened in room 713 and the service elevator, I thought I'd seen the strangest things this hospital could show me. But last week, during my night rounds, I learned I was wrong. Very wrong. Every night at 3 a.m. we do what we call the quiet rounds. It's when we check on all patients while trying not to wake them. Usually I start from room 701 and work my way down the hall. But that night was different from the beginning. It started when all the hall clocks stopped at exactly 3:33 a.m. Not just one or two, all of them. Each clock showing the same time, their second hands frozen in place. I checked my phone to verify the time, but it had completely died, despite being fully charged minutes before. The temperature on floor 7 started dropping rapidly. The digital thermometer at the nurses' station kept going down. 70 degrees, 65, 60, until it showed 45 degrees. In July, our maintenance system showed no problems, but I could see my breath in the air. When I started my rounds, I noticed something odd about the patient charts. Every single patient was listed as being in room 733, but floor 7 only has 30 rooms. Room 733 doesn't exist. I thought it must be a computer error, but even the paper charts showed the same room number. As I checked each room, the patients were all there, sleeping normally. But their monitors were showing something impossible. Every patient's heart rate was exactly 33 beats per minute. Every single one. Anyone with medical training knows that's not normal. Then I heard Lisa, the other night nurse, calling my name from the end of the hall. But Lisa wasn't supposed to be working that night. I distinctly remembered her calling in sick. Her voice sounded strange too, like it was coming through water. I walked toward her voice, passing room 730, the last room on our floor. But the hallway didn't end there like it usually does. It just kept going. The lights were different here, older, with a greenish tint. The walls looked aged, like this section had been here for decades. The new section had more rooms, 731, 732, and there it was, room 733. A room that shouldn't exist. The door was different from our regular rooms, heavy wood instead of modern metal. The number plate looked tarnished, like it had been there for years. Lisa's voice was coming from inside room 733. But when I checked the security cameras on my tablet, this section of hallway didn't appear at all. The camera feed showed the hall ending at room 730, like normal. As I stood there, all the lights in the regular section of floor 7 went out. The emergency lights didn't come on. The only illumination came from this new section, with its sickly green fluorescent lights. I heard footsteps coming from room 733. Many footsteps, like a group of people walking in perfect sync. Then I heard voices, multiple voices, all calling my name. They sounded like my colleagues, but wrong somehow, distorted, like old recordings played backward. The door to room 733 started to open by itself. Slowly, the hinges creaking. The air got so cold it hurt to breathe. In the dim green light, I saw something moving inside. Shadows of people in old-style nurse uniforms, all facing away from the door. Then they started to turn around. That's when the relief nurse found me, standing in front of a solid wall at the end of the regular hallway. According to her, I'd been standing there for 33 minutes, completely still, staring at nothing. The next day, I looked through the hospital's old records. In 1933, this wing had a different layout. It had 3 more rooms, 731, 732, and 733. They were sealed off after a tragic incident where several nurses disappeared during their night rounds. The official story was that this section was demolished, but sometimes at exactly 3:33 a.m., all the clocks on floor 7 stop. The hallway seems to stretch longer than it should, and if you listen carefully, you can hear multiple voices calling from somewhere beyond room 730, inviting you to join them for night rounds in a section of the hospital that officially doesn't exist.